Welcome to the Strong Women's Club, episode number 106.
This is the Strong Women's Club, where successful women share their behind-the-scenes stories of how they got to where they are today. Join us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I love having you here with me. And today's episode is the first time I have had the same person twice on the show. And you'll soon hear why. Sally Becker's on the program, otherwise known as the Angel of Mostar. And her story is very fascinating and very important work that she's doing. And I wanted to get her story out to as many people as possible, which is why I reached out to have her on the program again. So I introduced her pretty well when we first started speaking. So before that, I want to give you a heads up to two things. One is I start right off the bat asking you to go to Sally's website to take a good look around. And if you'd like to help her cause, you can contact her through that website. And the second thing is before the interview with Sally, I want to let you know about the Mastermind program starting soon. So if you're feeling a little alone and lonely working on your business, or if you're trying to figure things out and have nobody to talk to, then these masterminds will help you finish off 2017 strong. So we'll hear about the masterminds first, then get into the fascinating story with Sally Becker. Hi, this is Edie here, and I'd like to jump in to quickly remind you about the Strong Women's Masterminds that are starting this fall. There are only 8 spots available and only 2 groups being formed. So if you're at all interested, now is your chance to join. The Strong Women's Masterminds will help you plan your profit for the rest of 2017, ending it strong, plus give you a running start into 2018. You'll be organized, you'll be energized, and finally get that focus and accountability you need to be a successful, strong business owner. You know, I have managed rehab departments. I have owned and ran an event and catering company, including culinary classes, for 10 years. I have been the executive administrator for a very exclusive high-tech company here in Israel. And this 25-year variety of experience and expertise are lovingly poured into making these mastermind groups fabulous. Plus, I've learned from and interviewed over 100 brilliant women all about how they grew into their success, how they overcame the natural frustration and overwhelm that comes with being a woman in business and being a leader. I have also lived and studied in different countries, and I know how hard it can be when you're trying to make decisions, big or small, on your business, and you feel like you don't really have anybody to ask or anybody who really gets you. And I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur, to deal with friends and family members who love you, but they have no idea what you're talking about when you need advice about your business. And I can tell you that even my own loving, wonderful partner never even opened my website or listened to my podcast until I had him trapped in the car with me, and I made him. So this is for you. A mastermind is for you. If you have been feeling like you need some new eyes on your business, you would like to help others and also receive the knowledgeable support of other women matched to you for your mastermind group. If you are tired of the slow pace and you are eager to get your business wheels turning into a turbo speed and finish off the year brilliantly, then the masterminds are for you. If you're interested at all, as I said, there are only 2 small groups forming, and they're only for 3-month programs also, so they're a bit shorter than usual, so the investment on your part is smaller also. I'm so excited about the response that I'm getting about these groups. So if you're at all interested, please include yourself. I cannot wait to meet you and to start working together on your own success story. Sally Becker, welcome back to the Strong Women's Club podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here with me again.
Hi, Edie. Nice to be back.
You know, it's you're the first person to be on here twice, and for good reason, and because your work is extremely important. And the very first thing I want to mention here when we're talking is for people to go to your website, which is roadtopeace.org.uk, and click on the Get Involved tab, where you really need support. And this is a charity. And this is the reason why I reached out to you. You didn't reach out to me. I reached out to you to be able to tell your story again so that you will be able to get more support for the work that you're doing. And I wanted that to be really clear so that people who are listening now to your story, while they're listening to the podcast, can even go over to roadtopeace.org.uk, click on the Get Involved tab here and see you can buy a book, you can just donate money, you can download a song and donate a little bit of money for that, whatever works out for you. There's some artwork here that you can order. But this is the reason why I reached out to you, and I want to be very clear about it, that I want people to donate money to your cause because I think it's very important. So you didn't ask me to say that. That came straight from me. You didn't know I was going to say that. But that's how I'm starting so that people can be aware of what we're doing here.
That's great. Thank you so much, because it is the hardest thing, because obviously we're self-funding. We're completely reliant on donations, and I've really run out of savings. I can't fund this anymore. So it would be great if people could help.
Right. Okay. So let's get into your story. So the original story that we told is on episode number 29 of the Strong Women's Club podcast. We talked all about you being the angel of Mostar, and you were saving children there in the Balkan War. You were telling your story about that, and you wrote a book called Sunflowers and Snipers: Saving Children in the Balkan War, which everybody should have a look at and buy. You can buy that from this website as well. We talked a lot about your bravery in saving the children and your being assertive and saying yes to opportunity. We talked about you being able to help the Croats and the Muslims then. And, you even had a gun held to your head, and at that time, you just told the soldier off. It's an incredible story. So if anybody really wants to hear that part in great depth, please go back and listen to the podcast. As I said, it was number 29, and you can get it off of iTunes or wherever you hear your own podcasts. And you were honored by holding the Olympic flag in 2012 in the London Olympics. And basically, we said then that you never really know what you're capable of until you try, which was the takeaway from the beginning. You didn't know then that was the beginning of your story. It was really, we were kind of telling a story in the past, but you've taken this into now your current work as well. So I hope that helps you to as an introduction. But if you don't mind telling us a little bit about how you came now to be doing what you're doing now.
Well, I never really stopped. It's just that I was in different parts of the world, helping in different areas. So I was working out in Israel and trying to help build bridges between people, particularly people with sick children in Gaza who were getting treatment inside Israel, and they needed to keep that corridor open even during battles, during wartime, because there was a lot of cases where the children who were receiving constant treatment for cancer and other diseases, where they needed weekly medication or whatever, and they weren't being allowed through, particularly on the Palestinian side. So I went into Gaza in the hopes of changing that. But I was contacted in 2014, late 2014, by the son of the prince of the Yazidis, and his name was Brintazine, and he said to me, look, I've heard you've been doing a lot for kids around the world, and we could really do with your help. So we got talking, and I met with him. He invited me to Iraq. So I traveled out there and visited some of the camps. They're not refugee camps because the Yazidis are IDPs, and basically they were victims of a genocide in 2014 in August. It was just about now 3 years ago, and it was just dreadful. ISIS invaded the area. They escaped, a lot of them, from Sinjar onto the mountain, Sinjar Mountain, where they were trapped in the heat and the dust. And many men were executed. They couldn't get away, and they slaughtered them. And then some of the women and girls were kidnapped and enslaved, and many of the children were killed or taken into captivity. And basically, those are the people I've been helping. And I wasn't able to do a great deal, but living in these camps, for the internally displaced. They've got nothing really. They're living in tents. It's incredibly hot in the summer, especially now, and freezing cold in the winter. And those that were injured or hurt in some way or just sick, they're not able to always get treatment. Some just can't afford it. Some, there just isn't space because there's only one pediatric hospital serving the whole area of Duhok, where most of these camps are situated. So we started to take children out for treatment abroad, and we managed to get 4 to the United States.
Okay, so I'm just going to I just want to understand so the prince called you because he had heard of the work that you had done before during the Balkan War and knew that you were a kind of person that could get things moving more than he could. And
actually, a Jewish lady called Ruth Rubin,
okay,
who spends half of her time in Israel and half in the UK, she contacted me to say that she was making the link to him. He was the son of the prince. The prince is quite elderly now. He lives in Germany, but Breen is representing him around the world.
I see.
And so she gave him my contact details, and he called me, and it went on from there.
Wow, this is an incredible story. I know that it's really just a tiny, tiny part of your story, but still, it's already so fascinating because, first of all, for a Jewish lady, for Ruth Rubin to have this person's contact, for them to somehow have this kind of a relationship is an interesting story in of itself. And then she knew how to get in contact with you. And then you went to Iraq, which is, I imagine there aren't a lot of tourists flying to Iraq now. So how is that part, that very, very beginning part of your journey? Like, how was that even organized? Do you just buy a ticket and go?
Well, we had to arrange it first to make sure that we were there at the same time as Breen.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy from the United States who, at the time, he was thinking about making a movie based upon my story.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, it never came to anything. But anyway.
It might still.
You never know.
Yeah.
Anyway, he asked me, he also makes documentaries and things. So he asked me, could he come with? And I agreed. And he came out there with me, which I thought, was really brave for someone from Hollywood. They don't normally bother to go to dangerous places. They just make films about dangerous places. But anyway, he came, and we were met at the airport by Breen and his driver and a doctor. And they took us really on a tour of the camps to meet with various people, to meet families, to talk to women who'd been in captivity and talked about the dreadful things that happened. We met one woman, for example, who she had her 2 children with her, but she had a 14-year-old there in the tent and 2 small children. And then there was a 16-year-old still in captivity, and they didn't know what had happened to her and whether they'd ever see her again. They'd been released a few months earlier. There's something going on which is run by the Kurdistan government, and basically they're paying around $5,000-6,000 for each person to get out. They're paying basically a ransom. So that's what's happening. But some families, they've got 6, 7, 8 children, and there's now a network of people connected to ISIS who are charging more. So they're adding their bit on, if you like. And it's just horrible because these families cannot afford $100,000 to get their kids out. So it's just a horrendous situation. But anyway, the government out there are at least trying to help. And these people had been freed a few months earlier, but the eldest daughter was still in captivity and probably still is there now. There's about 2,500 women and children still being held. So the reason I was telling you is that the 14-year-old was sitting there just staring into space, not really speaking, and then she had this fit. That's the only way I can describe it, really. She suddenly fell sideways, and she was obviously in a terrible state. And the mother said, this is a result of the trauma that she's been through. She was a sex slave. And not only do they have to go through the horrendous experience while they're being held, being passed from person to person, but afterwards they've got to cope with the fact that they're isolated within their own community. That they're seen as soiled goods, I mean, as it happens, I met with he's a Yazidi priest. I met him at the temple at Lalish, which is the Yazidi temple, their most holy place. And he told me that it's changing now, that they've asked the people to understand that this was nothing to do with these girls, that these girls did not invite this to happen, and they should in no way be blamed for what occurred. And so it's changing now, and the attitudes are changing, but of course it's still going on. It's still, the diehards are just, they find it very hard to accept these young women when they're no longer seen as pure.
Yes.
But anyway.
It takes really an enlightened leader to be able to change perceptions that are so ingrained.
Yeah.
So then you basically were looking for children who needed, who really were the worst off medically, that you had to choose to take overseas to get treatment.
Well, we were basically given the names of those that were really in dire need of help, that couldn't get the treatment there. So we started a process of trying to find places that would accept them for treatment, because first of all, you have to find a hospital and doctors willing to treat them free of charge. So we were fortunate enough to know someone. It was a connection of Scott's, the guy who came with me. He managed to get hold of someone who knew people at the Shriners Hospital for Children in Boston, and they offered to help one of our patients, and then one of their other hospitals offered to help some of our other patients. And so we were able to bring 4 of these children across to the United States. One, he'd lost a leg, and they fitted him, he was 10 years old. They fitted him with a prosthetic limb and taught him to walk, and he was then taken back to the camps with his father, because he wasn't able to stay in the United States, unfortunately, and the rest of his family were back there. So he's back in the camp, but at least he can walk. Then we had a boy of 13 who'd lost an arm and severely damaged his legs when he stepped on a mine just outside of the camp. So he was treated, he was fitted with a prosthetic arm and taught how to use it, and they fixed his legs, so he was also able to walk much better, and he was no longer in such pain, and he went back. We had another boy with a severe injury to his leg. He was wearing a metal fixator when we first met him, and he had an infection in the bone. So they treated him at Shriners, and he also ended up going back. But there's one little boy, he was 17 months old when we found him, Dilberine, and he was actually on CNN maybe 4 or 5 times, because just as we'd taken him across and he was undergoing surgery, his father came with us, but his mother was just about to give birth, so she was unable to come, even though she'd been granted a visa. And then the father went back to collect her, and suddenly they were refused entry to the United States.
Right.
Due to the new rules, when
yes, from President Trump
took over. Yes. So there was a big problem then with trying to get his parents back into the United States, and he desperately needed his mother. He was severely burned all over his face, this poor little mite.
Right.
And he kept asking for his mummy, and anyway, finally they were able to come, and they were reunited, and they're still in Boston, and he's still undergoing extensive plastic surgery. But it's amazing the difference. Before he couldn't close his mouth, now he can close his mouth. His eye was so badly affected by scar tissue, he was going blind. Now he can see really well. And it's wonderful. And he's the most amazing little character. So, he's touched a lot of hearts along the way. And that's enabled us to highlight the story of the Yazidis, because many people knew nothing about this, about them as a
Right.
people.
Yeah. So this little boy, Dilbrain, as I've seen, his pictures are quite shocking. I mean, he was so badly burnt in his face, and he's such a sweet little child. I mean, he's so young, he's really just a baby. I mean, now I don't know, he's like maybe 3 or 4. I don't know how old he is, but.
Now he's about 2.5.
Oh, okay. So he's really very small, extremely badly burnt. And the story, I was following you on Facebook and watching what you were doing, and one person's story is so heartbreaking, and all of these children really brings home kind of the story of all of the people in the camp. I mean, these are extreme cases, but it's really just symbolic of how much work needs to be done to help these people. And I can't imagine what it's like to be in America and then have to go back to those camps.
Absolutely. And there are hundreds of thousands of people in the camps, so they're really crushed. It's just awful. But anyway, for me, it was kind of strange because I'm not used to dealing with that kind of thing. Before I would be the one rescuing the children, and I would then hand them over to the authorities, who would then arrange hospitals and everything else. So it's not really what I do, because I'm not good at admin, and I was having to do all this administration and, the bureaucracy of it. You have to have this letter and that letter, and then you have to send them to the consul, and they have to apply for visas and passports. They don't even have passports, these people. They fled in a hurry, or they escaped from ISIS, or they were released from captivity. So of course they don't have paperwork like ordinary people. And it was very difficult in that respect. But I wasn't risking my life in any way. At least I didn't feel I was. And then along came the battle for Mosul. And the thing is, while I was working at the camps, while I was helping out there, I came across this Italian doctor, a pediatrician, called Dr. Marino Andolina. And we got on really well, and we started helping some of these children together. And he managed to get permission to send quite a few over time to Italy. So a lot of children have got help through him. And he then decided he would join forces with me. So he's now part of Road to Peace. And when the battle started in Mosul, we decided we had to do whatever we could to help. So we took an ambulance and we went down there, and basically he was treating children in the street amongst these burned out buildings. From the back of the ambulance, women were coming out with their children, not having seen a doctor for 2 years. And they would venture over, queue up, and all these children were being thrust at us, babies, little boys, little girls. And he was treating them.
Supplies?
Yeah, we were giving out things like formula milk, because many of the women, they've been so traumatized, they're just not producing milk. And they had no facilities, no shops. They couldn't go out and buy formula milk. So they had nothing to give them. And a lot of the babies were suffering from malnutrition and dehydration and all sorts of dreadful things as a result of the lack of food. So we were giving out this baby formula. Marino was treating them for all kinds of ordinary ailments, really, that children get, but made worse because they haven't seen a doctor. So he was handing out antibiotics for kids. He was giving them paracetamol liquid when they were in pain and so on, and referring them, obviously, if they had anything serious, to the main general hospital. And we would take them when necessary ourselves. And then slowly the battle was escalating as they went further into the old city, the Iraqi army, the US army.
Can I just want to interrupt. I'm sorry, but could you just explain who's fighting who and where Mosul is and give it a little bit of background?
Of course. Mosul is a city in northern Iraq, and basically it's where ISIS began in that region, and it had been, I suppose you could say, under siege. It had been held by ISIS for the past, well, over 2 years. So the people have been living under the ISIS rule. They haven't seen doctors. They haven't had access to normal life for a very long time. And of course, now with the battles that are going on, as coalition forces are moving forward, there's shelling, there's sniper fire on ISIS side. They're shooting people indiscriminately. You know, if they try to leave, then they try to kill them, and often do. And people were starving. They weren't getting enough food. They were dehydrated, and so we just felt we had to help. And as the front line was moving forward, as the coalition forces were pushing forward alongside the Iraqi army, so these people were coming out of their damaged buildings, and they were desperately in need of help. Filthy, dirty, starving, some of them with diseases, some of them injured, and so we decided we had to help. So there we were in the middle of the city, handing out medication from the back of an ambulance. Marino was examining and treating maybe 50, 60 children a day at times. And then as the battle increased, we realized we would have to do more, and we would have to move further forward. And there was a German organization called CADUS who were opening a trauma stabilization unit alongside the Iraqi army. And they invited us to join them. And we were assigned 3 beds for the kids. So we had this pediatric area within this TSP, which was set up in an old car repair shop. It was like a cave, really. It was one very large room made of concrete. And that's where we were. We were treating the kids there. It was also our base, sleeping on camp beds. And every day, while Marino was treating up to 100 children a day because the women were bringing them there, I was going off with my driver to pick up the injured from further inside the city.
In the war zone.
Basically they call it the killing zone. First of all, we were going to a collection point, which was run by the Iraqi army, but we were the only ambulance in that area transporting people, men, women, children, transporting them to safety because, of course, it was still dangerous. And then we realized that the injured weren't coming out because they weren't able to walk, obviously, some of them. So we decided to start driving inside, and we found a lot of children, helped children with shrapnel wounds and limbs, missing. And some were suffering from old wounds that hadn't been treated, so they needed help too. And we started ferrying them out, either acting like a taxi service and just moving them to safety, families, whoever we could get into the ambulance, or actually taking the injured to the TSP, where they would be treated by our medics, and the children, most of all, because they took priority for us, they would be treated by Marino. And
so in the all of the supplies then and things that you needed were coming from the German organization?
No, we were providing our own medications. We were paying for our own formula milk, medication, medicines, everything that was needed. Everything Marino was using to treat the children, the primary health care, we were paying for, and also for the trauma medicines. We had our own equipment, and CADUS had theirs. But
how did you get it into Iraq? How did you get them? You brought them all with you?
We brought it in the back of the ambulance. Yeah.
So,
And we would go every few days and replenish and get
okay.
more.
So from where?
From Erbil. From Erbil in northern Iraq. It was about 2 hours drive away.
So
we
I'm
would
trying
drive
to make a picture. Sorry, to make a picture of what's going on. I mean, you're just two people, independent people in a war that you don't understand. I mean, you don't understand the language. It's not something that you're like. I mean,
no, but my driver spoke Arabic, so he was able to help. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that's very. I mean, and just driving in an ambulance, which I don't understand how. I mean, you say you picked up an ambulance. I mean, I don't know how to pick up an ambulance. How does that even happen?
Well, actually, for hiring, while we were running the mobile clinic since March, we were paying for an ambulance and also 2 armoured vehicles. So we were going in convoy. And then later, we could no longer afford the armoured vehicles, so we ditched those. And we were fortunate enough to have something called LST, Life Saving Team. It's an organisation that supplies medical equipment and medications. And also it's a small hospital in Erbil. And the guy who owns it was so impressed with what we were doing, he allowed me to use the ambulance free of charge, which made a big difference to us. And then we only had to pay for the medications and the formula milk and so on. So we were sleeping with these German medics in this cave-like place, which was absolutely horrendous. I have to say, this was the worst mission I've ever done. You know, I've been to Bosnia, I've been to central Bosnia, helicopter missions, ambulance missions across the front line in Mostar. I've come over the mountains in Kosovo and been shot and been imprisoned. But this was the worst mission in 25 years. It was horrible. Just the living arrangements for me were hell.
Not 5-star.
Oh, it was horrendous. It was, and at my age, and looking like I do, it's not like a young girl, when I was 33, I was young and I was able to move easily and run around. I didn't care what I looked like. It didn't matter. I was 33. Now, at 50 odd, you don't put someone my age in that situation. It was horrible. There was a flight of stone steps up to the bathroom. Now, these stone steps, they really led to nowhere. They led to a shelf. And on that shelf was a bucket with a toilet seat on it, and that was it. And I was dizzy anyway from dehydration. It was 46 degrees there. It was so hot. And you just couldn't get enough water. And trying to get up those steps, I'd torn the ligaments in my left ankle, so I didn't walk very well anyway. And I had to get up these uneven steps to this uneven platform, and it was very dark, and hope that I wouldn't slip because I'd been dead because it was concrete. It was a whole floor below me of concrete. So just a sheer drop. So I was fortunate enough that I only had to go once every day. That was for the few bottles of water that I did manage to drink. I didn't eat anything. I didn't dare. So that's how it was for a couple of weeks. So it was really bad. And then, in addition to that, while we were at the mustering point one day near the front line, I saw a very large cloud of what looked like white dust. And I wondered why I couldn't see any vehicles, because I thought there would be a big convoy because there was so much of this dust. But anyway, I didn't think much more of it, forgetting everything I'd been taught before I left Erbil about chemical warfare. And then suddenly my driver came over, Louis, and he said, "Can you smell something?" And I thought, maybe, slightly chemical smell. He said, "Somebody just told me, one of the soldiers told me that there's been a chemical attack, so we really do have to get out of here fast." Anyway, then I remembered the cloud of dust, and it made sense. So he's rushing to get me into the ambulance, and I realized there was still quite a few people left, and they were all being thrown into the back of trucks and whatever was there and driven out at top speed. But there was this family just left. So he's screaming at me to hurry, and I couldn't, because I couldn't leave them. So we had to get them into the ambulance, and we managed to get them out. and to safety. But by the time we got back to the cave, as I call it, my eyes were streaming, my throat was burning, and I had very strange discomfort in my chest. And Louis himself, he also was feeling something. His nose was running, and he said his eyes were itching, but he didn't seem as bad as me. And we didn't really know what to do. The doctors who were around us weren't really taking much notice. I did say to one of them, we think we were exposed to chemicals. And he said, oh, yes, we had soldiers next door being treated for exactly that. They think it was mustard gas mixed with something else. Anyway, it took 2 or 3 days for the symptoms to subside. And during that time, Louis and I had to still keep going back and forth with the patients because we couldn't just stop working. But it was extremely difficult. And, so as I say, it wasn't a very nice mission, to say the least. And then to make matters worse, one night it was bedtime and suddenly there was sound of machine gun fire and it wasn't far away. And although you hear shelling there because you're not far from the front line, machine gun fire you don't really hear. But it was close and it was getting closer. And then Louis spoke to the guys next door, the soldiers, and he came in and he said, it's ISIS. They've popped up. Nobody knows how. Just down the road. They were supposed to be in the west of the city behind the front line, but somehow they'd appeared in this other area, which wasn't far from us, about 4 streets away. So we were told there could be anything up to 30 of them, these ISIS militants, and that was terrifying.
Yes.
So it was dark. We were told not to put on any lights, not that we had any. We had torches and small lamps, but not to use anything because of showing them, that there were people there, and to keep quiet and to pack our bags in case we had to make a quick getaway. So it really was terrifying. I just didn't know what to think, and I ended up writing a letter to my mother and to my daughter, just really in case. And I sent them by text to a very close friend of mine in Brighton and said to her, please, if anything happens to me, pass these on, but obviously don't unless you know for sure that I'm dead or captured, because obviously being captured by ISIS means dead.
Yes,
that's
for me, very terrifying.
Yeah, that really was. It was horrible, especially writing to my daughter, because it's so difficult to know what to say, to a 17-year-old girl who's already lost her dad. So that was hard. But the good news is that we were able to, we transported around 260 out of the war zone. We helped around 40-odd injured children. And Marino treated up to 100 kids every day at that makeshift clinic. And in the end, we counted, it was because he stayed on for another week or 2 after I left. We reckon it was around 2,000 kids that he treated. So we did a good job in a short space of time. And I came back. My daughter, she had to take one of her A-levels without me being here, which was really hard for her and hard for me, Jewish guilt. It was terrible. But anyway, we just got told 2 days ago she got into her chosen university and she's absolutely thrilled.
Oh, and that really is good news.
So, yeah. And I'm off back to Mosul in about a week with Marino, with the doctor, because there's more work to do. He wants to do an assessment of the children because there are so many suffering from. He reckons that the malnutrition has caused all kinds of problems such as rickets, things that haven't been seen for a very long time, beriberi. And so he's going to do a report for UNICEF on these different cases that he came across and others that we're bound to find. But we're doing a new mission because, of course, the Iraqi forces are now pushing forward. The coalition forces are pushing forward to the last area controlled by ISIS in that region, which is Tal Afar. So we're heading that way because obviously we're going to have to do it all over again.
So really, this is almost, I mean, I don't want to say it's become like a way of life for you, but you've taken it so matter of fact that, of course, this is your life's mission, I guess. And you're going back to an area that is still in the heat of war, as you just said. And there's real concrete danger to you while you're there. And I wonder, like, how you deal with that yourself. You know, I read on the website here that you had breast cancer between these missions that you've been on, and you had to have a double mastectomy, and you had to fight that yourself, and that's something that a regular person, it really floors them. I mean, people obviously recover and go back to a good life and everything, but it takes a certain kind of person to make that really, like, almost like a secondary thing that happened to you.
Well, at the time, it was horrendous, obviously, most of all because my daughter, it was 2013, so she was 13, and, that was hard because she had to cope with knowing that I had a disease that everybody associates with death. And to be honest, they did make me feel at the hospital like this is it, really, it's only a matter of time, but it wasn't the case, and I'm absolutely fine, thank goodness. And I didn't have the chemo and all the horrible treatments that everybody said I should have, like radiotherapy and so on, because I'd seen what happens to people, and I'd also done a lot of research. And although some people are helped by it, the type of cancer I had, which was called invasive lobular, it was not going to help. In fact, my chances of survival would only change by about 2 or 3%. So I decided to forego it. And in fact, I was helped a lot by an organization in Israel called Efronat. They're carrying out trials for a new treatment, an immunotherapy. They've been working on it, these guys who lost their wives to cancer. That they've had scientists working on it for about 17, 18 years now, and they've proved safety. They're in the process of proving efficacy, and I think it'll be most definitely the treatment of the future. In fact, even here in UK, they're beginning to recognise immunotherapy as being a great thing.
But what goes through your mind, like for you, not just for you? I understand your daughter's fear, but for you, and the question of mortality or.
Well, I was scared, obviously, really scared, because I didn't want to leave her behind.
Yeah.
And my mother's quite elderly now. She's in her 80s. So I just didn't know what would happen to Billy. So that was a big concern of mine. But for me, myself, I just hate the business of hospitals. I hate being under someone's control that way. They tell you, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And there's times when you know that what they're telling you isn't right for you and you're supposed to succumb. And I find that very difficult. But anyway, I got through it, and the positive thing is that the double mastectomy, I mean, it was devastating, and they completely made a hash of the reconstruction. So I had to go through another 3 or 4 operations. But I've ended up with better boobs than I had before. So on the positive side, not that anybody sees them anymore.
But good. I'm very happy that you're healthy and fully recovered, and it's like it's a kind of a distant memory for you almost.
Yes, absolutely.
That's really wonderful news. But I kind of wanted to mention it because it shows something to your character and your strength of character and your matter of factness that we also spoke about on the last podcast where I talked to you. Where I was so impressed by the way you are able to handle very difficult situations and for the good of all. So I'm very thankful to you for that.
The thing is, Edie, it's not quite as easy as I make it. it sound.
Yes.
Trust
Okay.
me, I'm quite an emotional person inside. And when things happen, I don't just go, oh, well, ISIS are down the road, never mind. I was terrified and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And suppose they get us and, where are they going to take us? That's if they don't kill us instantly. And then there's the fear of rape and, it was just horrible. I really was very, very worried and very frightened. And, seeing children so badly injured, and the things you see are just horrendous in a situation like that. I won't go into it because I'm quite sure your listeners know what I'm talking about. But, dealing with those sort of injuries and knowing that those kids have got to live with the scars for the rest of their lives, and that's if they survive. We lost some of the children. I think 3 or 4 babies died because they had basically starved. It was too late. There was nothing Marino could do. He was holding a child in his arms and crying his eyes out. It was horrible. But he helped so many that's what got him through.
Yeah. So there are some if somebody wants to have more information, and there's a lot of like on the website, there's some links to videos on the BBC that you can see that we're following your work there as well, and everything that's happening over there, so that can get people more information. And the pictures really do tell a full story here. That is not an easy one to see, but you're doing something about it, which I'm sure makes you feel great satisfaction.
Absolutely, yep. And when people say why, it's difficult to answer because the thing is, it's what I'm best at. Why wouldn't I do what I'm best at?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, I'm hoping that you won't have to do this many more times.
The thing is, there's always war. There's always going to be war. And in fact, I've been talking to my colleagues at Hadassah in Jerusalem, the pediatric emergency unit, and we're already talking about doing something together because we formed a team some time ago. It's just, of course, they can't go to Iraq. It would be far too dangerous for them, and it just wouldn't make sense. So we're planning to work together, though, sometime in the future, which will be great because they really are the best in the world at trauma medicine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That would be very good for everybody. So, the Israelis are. It's very interesting how that works here because we have a lot of refugees from Syria coming into Israel in the north for medical help also. And also we just recently in Sierra Leone with a mudslide sent a big team over there to help with the disaster relief. And it's really part of ingrained into the culture of that I think a lot of people might not know about. So I like to talk about that a little bit to put Israel in a positive light.
There's a word, isn't there? There's a Hebrew word.
Tikkun olam.
Yes.
Yes. Tikkun olam is really literally it's like fixing the world.
Yes. Yes.
And it's part of the religious one of the religious commandments is Tikkun olam, to do well for the world. So religious people are supposed to follow that, and also non-religious people should also. So, okay, so I think we can wrap up. Again, I want to send people to your website. This is the longest interview I've ever had. Also, not only the second one. No. Your story is so interesting. Just a comment, really, because you're the second, and really, really very interesting. So people, please go to roadtopeace.org.uk and learn more about what Sally and her colleagues are doing to help these really unfortunate people who were just born in the wrong place. So thank you so much, Sally Becker, for coming into the Strong Women's Club podcast and for doing the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Edie. Thanks for having me on again.
Thank you so much to Sally Becker for the work that you're doing. Please be safe, Sally. You really are an angel, and I hope that this podcast episode will help get the word out about the work that you're doing and that people will want to pitch in a little bit to help as well. I'm flying out this week to Podcast Movement, It's the most fun conference you can ever imagine. And somebody said on Facebook that it's like a family reunion that you actually want to go to. And that's exactly what it feels like. This is my third year going. And this year I'm a speaker. I'm running a roundtable session about podcasting and questions that we all have and the future of podcasting and what it can bring. So I'm very, very excited about that. So also remember to send me an email to Edie at thestrongwomensclub.com. Edie, I spell EDIE, asking for more information about the masterminds that are starting soon. Thank you for staying here with me this long. I love you guys, and I'm feeling lucky at the moment with my life after hearing Sally's stories. Take good care of yourselves. Have a strong week, everybody. Litrot.